I would say the first area where I felt some challenges as I was aging is the physical changes. And since we have a culture that is so focused on youth and staying young, I was having some issues with the changes that I was experiencing. And one thing that well, there's two things that I remember. One of them was looking in the mirror and saying to myself, "Oh, you look so tired today." And then the next day looking in the mirror and saying, "Oh, you still look tired." And after a few days, I finally came to the realization that that is how I look, and that is part of the aging. And so accepting when I actually look at my physical body and accepting that things are changing, the texture of my skin is changing. It's hard in an area where beauty and youth is so supported. And I had an experience going on an airplane, and it was an early morning flight, so there were a lot of business people, and there were women in business attire, and then there were women who were young and beautiful and dressed really well. And what I experienced was the sense of invisibility. So in the midst, I didn't fit into either of those two categories, and I could actually feel the sense of being invisible. So that was pretty interesting. I think that, what I'm finding is I like to do things slower now, and I don't like to be so speedy and rushing, and I don't know that that's a bad thing. But I'm finding, again, in a culture that's so busy and everybody's rushing in so many directions, that can be challenging. It's interesting, in terms of Qigong and how it supports me in conscious aging, I would say on all levels, so I'll say a little bit. First of all, physically, the flexibility of my body is maintained, and the strength of my body. So physically, I feel like it's really supporting me, and I think it will continue to support me in being able to move easily and freely through my life, and that's really important. It's interesting in terms of mental. I feel like doing the Qigong and the concentration and using the mind and focusing and whatever else is really helping my mental capacities. And so I feel like that will help in terms of just the brain and how I function in that way. And lastly, perhaps, but certainly not least important, is just the sense of something so much bigger than me. So, one of the fears of aging can be like isolation, like you're just off by yourself and that people aren't having time for you any longer. But in this bigger picture, this expansive picture, you couldn't be alone if you wanted to. And so I feel like the connection to the natural world and the connection from my open heart as a consequence of the Qigong, it's impossible for me to be alone or isolated, is that we have more abilities to care for ourselves and keep ourselves healthy. So we don't need to be so dependent on external kinds of resources, that doing Qigong, eating well, there's various things that we actually have a lot of power in terms of maintaining our own health. I think Qigong being a very ancient practice, going back 5,000 years or more, in these cultures, these ancient cultures, there was that, again, as I said earlier, there was that respect for elderly people. They were seen as treasures. Mingtong talked about in China the difference between like trash to treasures. And so one of the things that I feel like in the practicing of Qigong, that it can open us to having a new idea, a new story about the value of us